to the Mayor of Macroom and the Mayor of Ballinagry, and to Ian Dempsey of Westcock Leader and Jean O'Sullivan, and to our wonderful guests from Scotland. They come from the Shetlands, the Highlands, and the Western Isles. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my present duty to welcome you all here tonight. Kevin has already done it, but on behalf of Aghinagh Heritage, I am once again doing it. A special word of thanks to all our sponsors, and especially to Westcock Leader and Ian Dempsey for their generous funding. The purpose of this transnational event is to create an awareness of the folklore and myth that exists in each area. It may be different, but it still exists, and it's the same way it's produced, presented, and collected. Secondly, it is imperative that we do preserve it and present it. And with the present generation, it can be easily lost with television, with a mobile phone, texting and all this. They seem to have lost a grasp of their folklore and their traditions. But we hope to preserve it for the future, and maybe that it might get popular again. And finally, between the four groups, we hope to produce a DVD with a sample of the folklore of each area in it. This project was created when our partners in Scotland contacted Westcock Leader looking for a partner in Ireland. And the fact that we had developed so many projects over the last number of years, they contacted us. And after a number of meetings, we eventually agreed to take part, and we are very satisfied that we did. Somebody once said that to make that success is failure turned inside out. And the meaning of that is that everything is a failure until you put a big effort into creating a success of it. We have put tremendous efforts into making a success of this concert and this festival weekend, and we do hope that you will enjoy it. So with those few words, I again thank you for your support. So now I have pleasure in calling on Chrisella Ross. She is from the Western Isles, but she's speaking on behalf of the Scottish communities, the trees, and she'll say a few words to you. Chrisella Ross.
Thank you very much. We're delighted to be here. We really are, even if we did struggle a little with aeroplanes. There are four partners, as Michael said. 3 from Scotland and Aghinagh. And they are doing separate work, different kinds of work. In the Western Isles, we have a Gaelic storytelling project working through the medium of Gaelic entirely. Although we will use English tonight, and we do use it, but the stories are initiated within the Gaelic community. We've been encouraging community storytellers to bring forward their stories to a national and an international audience. The Shetland partners for this project are working on the Trow stories. It's a great pleasure to have Lawrence Tulloch here tonight to tell some stories. I don't know if he is going to tell some Trow stories. And the partners from Highland are focusing on the virtual and the real storyteller. So there is a mix, and through the project We will be keeping in touch with each other to let each other know how it progresses, but also because we want a similar festival of story and song in the 4 areas. So that's exciting. We're hoping to have it in the Western Isles in February. I think Highland are targeting somewhere in May and Shetland later in the year. I might have these dates wrong, but you can ask them if anybody wants to go. So, tapula ishigaridu hamecho. I really am very pleased. There are many links and many similarities, including the language. Tapula ishigarden.
Thank you very much, Priscilla. Ladies and gentlemen, to launch our festival here this evening, we have a very knowledgeable and experienced woman. She has published many books, and they are related to the culture, traditions of generations gone by. Equally, her ability to tell a story leaves a lasting influence on everybody listening. So with those few words, I have great pleasure in introducing to you Alice Taylor to launch the show.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I was never before described as accomplished, so I'm very flattered, actually. I was here about 12 months ago to launch Jerry Nelis's book, and that was a great honour. And that night, I kind of got the idea that Ballinaglee was a very special place, and I think they're proving it here tonight. And it's great in a way that there's so many people gathered here to enjoy the art of storytelling. And it is an art, because in a way, I sometimes regret the fact that, art is limited to music and painting and writing, because art covers a far wider spectrum. And in a way, art is any medium that opens up the channel into our creativity. And storytelling really does that. I have a slogan on my kitchen wall at home, and it says, "Imagination is the evidence of the divine." And there's a lot of imagination in storytelling. And it's a strange thing. You look at children, and children are natural. They have natural imagination. They love stories. Children love stories. And in a way, when we're born with a balance between the left-hand side and the right-hand side of our brain. Now, the right-hand side of our brain is the side that loves music, dancing, storytelling, everything creative. And children have this. But they're usually born into a world that cultivates, this is our world, the left-hand side, which is a practical side, the side that says 2 and 2 makes 4. And the child, as he grows older, loses the spontaneity of the creative side of his brain. And that's a terrible tragedy when we lose the child within ourselves. And I suppose we all remember that song made famous by, I think it was Ralph Harris, about the little boy who went to school and the teacher said to him, "Let's paint the rainbow." And the little boy was delighted and he splashed colour on the page. And the teacher came and she said, "What's that?" He said, "That's the rainbow." And she said, "All the colours." "Oh," he said, "there are so many colours in the rainbow." He said, "So many colours in the rising sun. There's so many colours in the rainbow. And I love every one." The child was alive. His creativity was flowing. But the teacher said, "No." "No," he said. She said, No. She said, "There are this many colours in the rainbow, and you paint the rainbow as it is." And he did. And later that child went to a school where there was an imaginative teacher, and she said, "Paint the rainbow. Paint it every colour." And the child said, "No," he said, "there's this colour and this colour and this colour." The child then saw the rainbow. He was trained to look at it through the eyes of the teacher. The spontaneity of the child was gone. And in a way, that's That's the disaster of our world, in a way, that we don't cultivate our creativity. Because we're all born. Now, some people think, oh, I can't do this and I can't do that. We emphasize so much what we can't do that we forget what we can do. Everyone is born with a creative pool. And the tragedy of life is if that creative pool is never accessed. It lies dormant. And the most frustrated people are people who don't use their creativity. The pubs of Ireland, the drugs, full of them. Because if people have a release of their creativity, it's the most deeply satisfying thing. And a storyteller has that. Now, storytelling is as old as time. If we think of any of our faiths, the Bible, Jesus told the story. The stories came. We remember stories long after we've forgotten the facts. Because statistics and all these things, dates, we forget. But in a way, the story, it's a bit, I always think it's like cream on the inside of a jug. The milk is gone. The story sticks to the inside of the jug. And, you know, immigration was always part of Irish life. And we're all very aware of it. But I suppose the story of Annie Moore captured all our imaginations. It put a human face on a tragic story. And in a sense, even though storytelling is as old as time, it belongs to biblical times, it's as new as today as well. And I'm not political now, but I smiled over the last couple of weeks. I mean, Bertie Ahern came on television. He told a great story. And the media got it wrong. The political pundits got it wrong. But Bertie clicked with the ordinary people of Ireland. And that's the art of the storyteller. You know, the storyteller puts a frame around the story. But in the story, there must be room for the listener. And then the story works. Because that's the power of the story. There's space in the story. John McAhern, who died last year, one of our greatest writers, said his books were dead until the reader picked it up. The reader brought the book alive. And you know, immigration was always part of Irish life. And you meet Americans, they come back again and again and again. They come back to find their story, the story of their origins. It's the most powerful thing, the power of the roots, the coming back. And in one sense, it would be a terrible tragedy if when they came back, there was nothing here. And that's where groups like this come in to preserve what's so valuable for us. I mean, I grew up in a farmhouse where 8 generations of our family had grown up. And I mean, immigration was always part of life. In Ireland, now we have the Celtic Tiger and they're coming back, but so many went away and they came back to our farmhouse from America, from Australia, everywhere. They came back hungry for the story of their roots. And it rang bells inside in my head. I thought how valuable it is to record the stories. And I think that's why I started writing. I mean, my children came back then and I could see that, you know, to them, it was almost like a fairy story. It was fiction. They said, he had no electricity, he had no bathroom, he had no television. How did you live? I mean, it was like another land to them. And if you think about it in a way, I mean, we went to school. I suppose I will always be known as a woman who went to school through the fields. But I say there are a lot of people here who went to school through the fields. Now, we passed a little stone bridge. And every family who passed that bridge in the morning put a stone on the bridge. So when you came to the bridge, you knew how many had gone to school. And that was, I always said that was the first telephone, the stone on the bridge. And now we're on the internet. It's a mighty leap for one generation. But back in that farmhouse, you know, I suppose the fact there was no television, the neighbours came in at night and they told stories, and we loved the good storytellers. And looking back afterwards, I didn't realise that my father, as part of the way of, in the ordinary day-to-day language of the day, he really told stories, even though we didn't realise it. I remember he telling us once, I mean, we lived, it would be about 50 miles from here on the Cork-Kerry border. Now, it was a very isolated place. We were 3 miles from the nearest town. When you came to the gate of our farm, you were still a half a mile from the house. And one day, a lorry driver from the city came down to the local creamery, and the local creamery lorry was broken down, and so he was directed to our farmhouse. This was the Cork City men. Went up the 3 miles of this narrow country road, down the long Briery, And when he came into our farmyard, I suppose he thought, oh my God, I'll never again get out of this place. He wound down the window of the cab and he put his head out and he said to my father, does Almighty God know people live down here? No, I think Almighty God did know we lived down there. So I think if you live down there, we live very close to God and very close to creation and very close to each other as well. We the Mrs. Casey who lived near us, and I think that she was a inert woman. I mean, she never left that parish, but she had an innate wisdom. And I think the reason she had it was she delivered the babies and she laid out the dead. So she was in connection with the two big things in life. In between is just the journey. And she was a liberated woman. Now, she never heard of Women's Lib, but she was a liberated woman without knowing it. And she used to plant set potatoes. When I say plant, it just shows how long I'm gone off the farm. She used to set potatoes, herself and the husband, in our field. And now that time in rural Ireland, the man would always do the digging and the woman would do the picking. But Mrs. Casey did the digging and he did the picking. And that kind of told a lot about the relationship. So one day my father went into the field and he said to Mrs. Casey, you know, how was she? She looked back at the husband, who was far smaller. He was a small man. She was a big, powerful one. And she said to my father, you know, she said, my little man is failing. And she wasn't too upset about it either. And so anyway, my father went back to talk to the husband, and the husband looked up the field at her, and he said to my father, I have to let her forge ahead, or otherwise she'd think she was failing. So, you see, they had the psychology of it worked out. They didn't need any counsellors or anything. And I think the reason people had so much time to talk and to listen to each other. And the old passed on their wisdom to the young. And there was more time. We have a fair shortage of listeners in today's world. And that's to our detriment, really. And children need to be listened to. And I'm going to tell you the story now about a little boy called Johnny. Now, sometimes we dismiss children and we think they're not, you know, that they look at things at a very simple level. Maybe sometimes, but maybe sometimes they have an innate wisdom. Now, Johnny was a special child, and he was in a home for special children. And one day the teacher came in, and she gave Johnny a big lump of modelling clay. Now, we called it mala going to school. Now, she gave it to Johnny, and she said, now, Johnny, what's that? And Johnny looked at it, and he said, cow dung. And she said, oh. And she said, what are you going to do with it? He said, I'm going to make a teacher. So she thought, oh, what's gone wrong with Johnny? So she called the headmaster. So the headmaster came in and he said, Johnny, what's that? And Johnny said, that's cow dung. And he said, what are you going to do with it? He said, I'm going to make a headmaster. So the headmaster thought, oh God, Johnny is regressing. So they sent for the psychiatrist. So the psychiatrist was smart, you see, and he came and he said, right, Johnny, he said, that's cow dung and you're going to make a psychiatrist. No, Johnny said, not enough cow dung. So Johnny was one step ahead. So sometimes I think a story can paint a picture of a whole way of life. Just one story. And I think the one, I suppose, thing we suffer from in today's world, the one big, and everybody's complaining about it, but we all seem helpless, the hurry. We're running past each other. Nobody has time. They're rushed off their feet. And it's a terrible, terrible thing. And I want to tell this story because I think it's very relevant for this weekend. And maybe this is what this weekend is all about. Because there was this developer, and when I say developer, I get nervous because they're the plague of our lives when we think about it. He went to India. Now, this guy was into a fast book, and he went to a very remote part of India, and he came upon this very valuable substance, and he knew he was on a winner, and he knew the natives didn't know the value of what they had. So he got it at a great price, and he hired Indian carriers to bring it to the port. They were days and days' journey from it, and they were delighted. And he paid them not a great wage, and he couldn't get over how happy they were. They worked long hours, they didn't question anything, and everything was fantastic. So the night The final night, anyway, he thought, well, we'll make the port tomorrow, and grand, I'm on a great thing here. So the morning after, he got up, and all the Indians were lying down the ground. And he thought, what's wrong? So he went around and he tried to wake them, not a budge. So he went over and he lay down beside one of them. And he said, what's wrong? Well, the Indian said, he said, for many days, he said, we move. He said, we move too fast. Now, he said, we wait for our souls to catch up. So maybe that's what this weekend is all about. That the people who are coming here, the storytellers, because storytellers are never in a hurry, and they're all here, and we're all here, and we're all waiting for our souls to catch up. And it's a great honour for me to be called on to declare this storytelling festival open. So please, this weekend, wait for your soul to catch up with your body. Thank you very much.
Wasn't she fabulous, ladies and gentlemen? She still has a tremendous way of words, both orally and on the paper. She was marvellous. Now, Aghinagh's Comhaltas Ceol Tori, you're all familiar with, were founded in 1975. And they've taken part in so many sessions and taught so many musicians. They've contributed hugely to the locality through their art. And amongst their group, of course, they have a lot of All-Ireland medal winners. And last year, I think, was a huge year for them because they hosted the Munster Flag Ceol here in Macroom, which was a huge, huge success. So now, I put your hands together, please, for Aghinagh Comhaltas Ceol Tori.
We'll continue now with two hornpipes, Pretty Maggie Morrissey and The Plains of Boyle. Okay, 3 jigs this time. The Humours of Glendart, Out on the Ocean, and another jig which goes by many names, but tonight we're going to call it the Briery Gap jig. We'll play a final selection of reels before we leave you, and what session would be complete without a session of reels. A well-known and very popular reel. It's not by no means a new one, called the Sally Garden. It's been around for many, many years. The Sligo Maid, and a reel called Father Kelly's. And just to show you that Father Kelly wrote many tunes, this is called Father Kelly's number 1.
'tis time, ladies and gentlemen, now for the first of our Scottish guests. And he's a man by the name of Lawrence Tulloch. And he comes from the Shetland Islands, and he tells the stories of one of the Northern Islands, his home island, the island of Yell. Now he was a mighty man, because I think he was a postmaster, a painter, a weaver, a lighthouse keeper. I'm not sure if it was all at the same time or not, but if it was, he was a great man. Now, a lot of the stories were handed down to him by his father, Tom Tulloch. So, and he's been the guest speaker at a numerous amount of Scottish storytelling festivals. And he has 3 tapes of his stories. So I'd like you to give a very big and warm welcome now, please, to Lawrence Tulloch. Thank you very much.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I can only echo what Priscilla and others have said about what an enormous pleasure it is to be here, and I'm very, very proud to be invited and be part of this great weekend event. Now, I come from the Shetland Islands, as you've been told already, and I could identify with much of what Alice Taylor said, because I grew up in a place where we had no mains, water or electricity in the 1940s and 50s, so I know exactly what she's talking about. Now, all my life I've had a love affair with Irish music, traditional Irish music, and no later than tonight in the hotel across the road, I was watching the program Come West Along the Road. And in that program, I saw 2 lots of great Irish musicians, but 2 in particular, Sean Maguire and Dermot McLaughlin. Now, they were friends of mine, and we had the very great pleasure of having them in our house as guests. They were only 2 of many Irish musicians and fiddle players that stayed with me and my wife Margaret over the years. In fact, so much so that our house was known as the Irish Embassy. And musicians by the score seem to come, and we love having them. Now, Ireland and Shetland has many things in common, and most certainly fiddle playing is one of them, and the love of music and traditional music. But also, we have another thing in common, and that's the little people. Priscilla mentioned the trows. Now, you in Ireland, you have leprechauns, and we have trows. They're about the same size, as far as I know. They're little people, and our trows are fun-loving. They make music, and they sing, and they dance, and they play fiddles. And so long as you leave them alone, then they're friendly, they're not going to harm anybody. But if you get on the wrong side, then they can very definitely give you a lot of mischief. So, I'm going to tell you a story now, one of the stories that I got from my father, about a Shetland fiddler who got involved with the trows. His name was Robbie Anderson, and he lived on the same island that I live on, the island of Yell in the north. Now, Robbie was a poor man. He was a farmer and a fisherman. He had a wife and 4 children, but they were really, really poor. They had no money at all. They lived a hand-to-mouth existence. But the one thing that marked Robbie out from being different from all the other men in the parish was that he was a great fiddle player. He was, by common consent, the very best fiddle player on the island. And many people hearing him for the first time declared that he was the very best fiddle player they'd ever had. So he was the first man to be invited to weddings or gatherings of any kind. Now, once on Christmas Eve, the old folk in Shetland called it Yule, Linehan. He was walking along the road, he was going to feed some animals, when he met a trow. Now, he knew that it was a trow the moment he saw him. It was a small, tiny little red-haired man that stood in the road in front of him. And the trow says, "Robbie, we want you to come and play at our Yule foy." A foy is a Shetland word for a feast, for a party, yeah. Now, Robbie didn't like trowels. He didn't trust them, and he didn't want to have anything to do with them. So he said to this little man, he said, "No, I can't come and play at your foy because this is Yule Ian." And he said, "Me and my wife, we get many visitors. We visit neighbours, and we play and we sing and we have a few drinks, and I'm not leaving my wife and family on this Yule Ian." "Okay," says the trow, "we won't hold it against you, Robbie. But," he says, "if you change your mind, and if you come and play for us, then I will make it very well worth your while. But a word of warning," he says, "you must not tell your wife, your friends, your family, tell nobody where you've gone, or when you come back, where you've been. You must not do that." And with that, he disappeared. Now, Robbie continued his journey along the road, but he became very thoughtful, because never before had anybody offered him money or payment for fiddle playing. This was a brand new concept, and he was a poor, poor man. So he thought, well, maybe if I can earn money from the trows by playing the fiddle, maybe it's a worthwhile thing to do. So when night came, he didn't tell his wife where he was going, but he took his fiddle and he left the house. And he knew where to go, because the trows all lived in a hill. And on very special occasions, the side of the hill would be open, and the trows could be seen going in and out. But when he came there that night, the whole side of the hill was open, and it was brightly lit, and there were the sounds of laughter and voices and the clinking of glasses, and they were having a great time in there. So Robbie entered the hill, and he was met at the entrance by the same trow that had invited him. And the trow took him in, and they had a table. Now, Robbie wouldn't have known the name buffet, but that's what they had, was a table laden with food and drink. Robbie, as a poor man, didn't even know what it was. He had never seen the like before. Now, the trow says, "Robbie, eat and drink as much as you like. You're welcome." But Robbie didn't take anything, because he didn't trust the trows. He had heard stories of fiddlers that played for the trows, and they thought they'd been away from home a few hours, but they'd actually been away 100 years. So he didn't trust the trows. He wouldn't eat anything, he wouldn't drink anything. But the trow took him in and showed him a place where he could play. So he stood there and he took out his fiddle, tuned it, and began to play. And Robbie was a good fiddler, but he realized very quickly that this was a bit special. He knew in his own heart that he was playing better than he'd ever done before in his whole life. And the trows loved it. And they sang and they danced and they hooked and they reeled around the whole place, and it went on all night. And Robbie played and played and played like a man possessed. But gradually, after many hours, the trows began to thin out, and all the children had gone, been put to their bed, Robbie supposed. And eventually, he seemed to lose track of time, but he was aware that he was now alone. There was no trows left. They'd all gone, every last one. So there was no point in playing any longer. He packed up his fiddle and he set off for home. And now he was in a very different frame of mind, because he knew that his wife was going to question him closely about where he was been. And he couldn't tell her, because he was so frightened for the trow's revenge that he couldn't tell her. And the worst of all was that the trow had promised to pay him, and he'd got nothing. The trow didn't even say thanks. So Robbie trudged home, and he was right. He was met by a very frosty reception from his wife, and she accused him of being with another woman. And he protested his innocence, but nonetheless, she didn't speak to him for about a week after that. But as time went on, the atmosphere in the Anderson household kind of thawed out a bit. But at the end of January, it came a very big fall of snow. And having fallen, the snow lay like alpine conditions, with the snow everywhere, feet deep, and severe frost. and no wind and sunshine every day. And the sea was like a mirror. Some of Robbie's neighbours came and said, how about taking a boat and going fishing? So, of course, they had nothing but salt food during the winter, no deep freezers, nothing like that. So to get fresh fish was very welcome. They went off, and they had never seen anything like it. The fish was there by the million, and they only had to put out lines, and the lines was full of fish. They hauled them in, put them out again, and in a matter of no time at all, the boat was so full of fish that they couldn't take any more. And they went back to the shore. And you see, this being the end of January, the fish was in excellent condition. They were ready to spawn. They were full of roes, and it was the very best fish you could get. And not only did they have enough for themselves, but they were able to give everybody in the village fish. So the following day they went off, the same thing happened again. And they were off several times. But then the day came when Robbie said, no, I don't want to go today. I have too many things to do home. So he didn't go, but some of the other men went by themselves. And that time they caught very little. Nobody was surprised at that, because all good things come to an end. But after another week, the same conditions still prevailed, and Robbie went with them again. But this time it was the same as the first times. They filled the boat with fish in no time. Now Robbie began to wonder, is this how the troughs pay me? But he never said. But anyway, eventually the snow was gone, and all the farmers had sheep in the hills, and they were fearful for the losses. And they were right to be fearful. Some of the farmers had lost anything up to half all the sheep. But Robbie, he lost none. All his sheep was alive and well, and each and every one of them had twin lambs, and the ewes had gallons of rich milk, and the lambs thrived, and he got a great price for them at the market. And so it went on all through the year. Robbie had phenomenal luck with everything he did. And in the harvest time, a storm came. It flattened all the oats and the bear, and it was just a soggy, tangled mess. That was everybody except Robbie. His corn was standing straight and golden, waving in the breeze, and not so much as a broken straw. So the following year, when Yule came, he made no hesitation and walking along the same path, and the same trough was there, and the same invitation was given and accepted this time, and the same warning was given. And Robbie went back and played for the troughs, and the same thing happened the following year. He had the most unbelievable luck. Everything went well for him. Now, this went on for years and years and years, until Robbie's family had grown up, and now he was no longer a poor man, because having such good crops and having such healthy stock, he was able to buy more land and more stock, and he was well off in the parish. But one year, he'd been playing for the troughs every year in about 15 years. But this year, he went along the road, and there was no trough there, not a sign. Now, he thought maybe he got the time wrong, and he went home and waited a while and walked along the road again, still no trough. And he pretty well walked up down the road all day, but he never appeared. So when night came, he didn't know what to do, whether to go or not to go. But by this time, it was established routine that he disappeared on Yule Ian. So his wife expected him to go, and so did everybody else. So he took his fiddle, and he went to the place where the troughs lived. Right enough, the door was open, but there was no light, no signs of laughter, no talk, no clinking of glasses. The place was dead. And he was just about to turn away when he saw a tiny, tiny, tiny light away in the furthest corner. So he went there, and when he came there, then there was one old woman sitting huddled over a tiny fire, a turf. You would call it a turf fire, we call it peats. But she only had about 3 peats, and they were smouldering. But she knew Robbie, and she looked up and she said, "Oh, Robbie, good of you to come, but you're not needed here anymore." He said, "Why?" She says, there's nobody left but me. And he says, where is everybody? Well, she says, you know that us Trows, we don't like preachers. We don't like ministers. And the ministers and the priests and the preachers don't like us either. So she says, there's a new minister come to the place. And he preaches so vehemently against the Trows that all my people, they can't stick it any longer. So they've all gone to the Faroe Islands. But she says, me, I'm too old to go anywhere. And she said, besides, I'm kind of deaf, and I don't always hear him. So she says, I'm staying. But Robbie, thank you for coming, but no thanks. So Robbie took his fiddle, and he set off home. And of course, they were all surprised to see him. But ever after that, Robbie became an ordinary man again. Some things worked for him, some things didn't work. But he never again had the luck that the Trows gave him. That's it.
Wasn't that fabulous, ladies and gentlemen? The accent from behind, I thought Sean Connery was there for a while. Wasn't it fabulous? Our next performer is a local girl, very, very talented, 15 years of age. She's been performing since she was 6. And in some school productions, I know that she played Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz at the age of 10. She comes from a very musical family. You'll be seeing more of her mammy later on. And her daddy plays the drums here for us every Christmas for the pantomime, so I hope he'll be here again for Aladdin in December. So I'd like please, to give a very, very warm welcome to Karen Deneen. And she'll be singing a song for Ireland accompanied by Grace Donovan. Karen Deneen, I beg your pardon.
Walking all the day near tall towers where falcons build their nests. Silver wing they fly, they know the call of freedom in their breasts. Soar black head against the sky with twisted rocks, they run down to the sea. Living on your western shore, saw summer sunsets, asked for more. I stood by your Atlantic sea and sang a song for Ireland. Talking all the day with true friends who try to make you stay, telling jokes and news and singing songs to pass the time away. Watch the Galway salmon run like silver dancing, darting in the sun. Living on your western shore, saw summer sunsets, asked for more. I stood by your Atlantic sea and sang a song for Ireland. Drinking all the day in old pubs where fiddlers love to play. Someone touched the bow and played a reel which seemed so grand and gay. Stood on Dingle Beach and cast in wild foam, we found Atlantic bass. Living on your western shore, saw summer sunsets, asked for more. I stood by your Atlantic sea and sang a song for Ireland. Dreaming to fight. Waking in the dawn, I see you crying in the morning light. Flying where the falcons fly, they twist, they turn, all in the clear blue sky. Living on your western shore, saw summer sunsets, asked for more. I stood by your Atlantic sea and sang a song for Ireland.
That lovely again, ladies and gentlemen. She was superb. Well done, Karen. Excellent altogether. Now, our next performer again is from Scotland, from the Shetland Isles, from Lerwick, and his name is Maurice Henderson. And he's a marvellous fiddle player. I know that he's been fiddling since he was 12 and playing the fiddle after that as well. But I know that his home was full of music and that there were tremendous sessions in the home, and his father actually made fiddles. And his mother and his grandmother came from a classical background. They were both classical pianists. Now he's a storyteller and a fiddle player as well. And he's an amazing man, really. He's also an environmental technologist, if you please. And he's based back in Shetland again, and he's involved in renewable energy for the Shetland Islands. So it gives me great pleasure now to welcome Maurice Henderson. Thanks very much indeed. Thank you.
last tune there they called the Old Clatton Row, and it was supposed to be a tune they would maybe ask the fiddler to play at a wedding or something about 3 in the morning, and they would decide if he made too many mistakes it was maybe time to cut off a supply. So he had to make a job of it. Well, Lawrence has told you all about the Trows, so I don't have to say about them, but they have a repertoire of tunes in Shetland that have come from the playing of the Trows. Various fiddlers have disappeared over the years, and some of them have brought a couple of tunes back, the ones that survived. And this one in particular is a kind of favourite of mine. It's from the island of Fettler, and that's where my father is from and family and that. And there was a fellow that used to tell this story, Jamesy Lawrenson, and he was a great storyteller, a good singer and that. He could sing the tunes, but he didn't play the fiddle, but he could noodle the tunes pretty good. That he told this, it was from his great-grandfather, which is, no, he was alive about 1800 or something like that, so this is an old tune. And Jamesy, he was also known as the strongest man in the island. And he was probably as famous for his strength as his storytelling. And to give you an example, he could take, we have a boat up in Shetland, a type of boat called a sixerine. It's a 6-oared boat, about 28, 30 feet long. And he could take 2 of those heavy oars and straight arm them and clap them together just for a bit of fun. And yeah, he's a strong man. He could also lift a horse, of course a Shetland horse. He could do that, yeah. And there's many examples, but a favourite was they were hauling up this boat, one of these heavy boats, flit boat, up the slipway, and on the one side was Jimsy and his brother, and the other side there was 6 men, the Thomason family, and the Thomason men thought for a fun, wouldn't it be a fun when Jimsy roars, "High up!" to pull up the slip if we all pull down the way and see what happens. So that's exactly what they did. High up! And then Jimsy thought, there's something not right here, and he gave an extra shove and the boat just got up the slip and left the Thomasons at the bottom. Him and his brother were at the top. And they just couldn't have believed this, that he was pulled the boat up, well, him and his brother themselves. And then they looked down at the slip and the soles of Jimsy's boots were still at the bottom of the slipway. Strong man. But back to his story. His grandfather, Gibby Lawrenson, he was also renowned for his strength as well. He built this old water mill out in the hill. We have these small stone mills. They're very kind of simple structures. And they would have had a kind of thatched roof and the turtle kind of the wheel in there. And anyway, they were much in demand because there are not that many burns capable of driving a mill. And there were a lot of people needing to use this mill. But the only man that was brave enough to go out there at 2 in the morning, and kind of coming later on in the year, with all those troughs around in the hills, was Jimsy's grandfather, Gibby. And this particular night, he was set off with a Shetland pony and some dried corn, ready for grinding this corn. And he got in the mill and he got tied up the mare and that. And he got the mill going and set him down. And he let the kind of corn was grinding away. And it wasn't long before he started to kind of go to sleep a pretty bit, kind of nod off. And he heard the horse, the pony outside, making a kind of scruffling, a kind of disturbed noise. And right enough, the troughs were about. And he heard somebody outside the door. And the door sprung open, and a small trough woman came in with a big bundle of washing that she had been washing in the burn. And she's just about the right height for Jimsy's grandfather, his knee, kind of where he was sitting. And she just laid all the wet cloths on his knee to dry. And he pretended to be asleep because he didn't want to disturb this troughs. They don't like that kind of thing. And but he heard more voices outside, and there was a small, what he presumed to be a wedding party of troughs heading up the burn. And with them they had a fiddle player, and they came into the mill and they spied him and said, "Oh, we've got a sleeper here." what'll we do to the sleeper? But the old drow woman, she said, nah, he's doing a fine job of drying my washing. You just let him be. And anyway, she said, we've stolen most of his best top puckles of the corn over this last 2 or 3 years, and he's done us no harm. So Shanko, she named the drow with the fiddle and said, well, why don't you just play him a tune and let him be? So this is the very tune because Jimsy's grandfather minded him. And when he got back to his house, his son played the fiddle, and this has been handed down through the Lawrenson family all these years. So I'm going to make an attempt to him. I presume it's a kind of a dance tune for the Trows. And I'm going to go after that into another Fettler tune, kind of lively, real called Hjogravilta. The Trowie tune, by the way, is called Winja Depla, after the loch where the burn comes down for. So you can imagine the Trows dancing around them. They have the hanken and banken is the names of the steps they do, kind of. Anyway, this is some.
But the delay there now, because we're having a bit of wrinkle coming up. A Colleen Dess, a local girl, aged 11. Aghinagh is her name. Hugely successful at junior level at All Ireland and Munster set dancing competitions. She's marvellous. She just missed performing at Michael Flatley's wedding, I think, last weekend because she was in Motherwell in Scotland performing in the Scottish Open Dancing Championships. I've seen her before. She's performance here at St. Patrick's Night always. She's a marvellous little girl. So a big hand, please, for Aghinagh. Thank you. Our next guest is also from Scotland, from the Scottish Highlands, the Sutherland area of the Scottish Highlands. And she's very involved in the Arts Council there, the Development Council. And she's going to do her own composition. Would you give a big warm welcome, please, for Roxana Meehan. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks.
I am watching from your eyes.
Now, the next lady needs very little introduction, really. She's a former mayor of Ballinaghree, and I know that she's produced CDs. I know they raised €10,000 for Macroom Hospital a few years ago, and I know that she has another CD coming out again now, I think sometime before Christmas. And I heard her singing at a function there lately, and there was a bit of drink being consumed, and there was a bit of clattering of glasses, and the devil knows what. And she was called up to sing, and honestly, the whole thing stopped straight away because she controlled the whole room with her voice. And I know that she has got worldwide fame as well in recent times with The Wind That Shakes the Barley, a tremendous production, and her performance of the song was marvellous, heard all over the world. So I know you'll give a very, very big warm welcome to your very own Peggy Lynch, and she's going to sing The Sod of Turf from the Bogra Mountains. Peggy Lynch, ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
I was going to say that I was going to tell a story, but I was going to tell the story in a song about immigration from my area of Ballinaghree. Long, long ago, when people were immigrating, they couldn't come home as often as they do now. And it tells about the loneliness they felt in a distant land away from home. And it's called A Sod of Turf from the Bogra Hills. I'm sitting watching the coal fires burning, my heart and thoughts, they are far from here. In fancy's wings, they are returning to where Cork's dear old peaks appear. There is something here on the shelf before me, and oh, what rapture my heart it brings. What a flood of memory it brings o'er me, a sod of turf from the Bogra Hills, a sod of turf that with devotion I took from home as a souvenir. But little I knew that beyond the ocean it would one day cause me to shed a tear. And could I stop my tears from flowing at the thought of Ireland's vales and hills? And would I stop my thoughts from going in fancy back to those Bogra Hills? Old hills in your bleak, majestic splendor, you are far more dear to me. Your memory awakens thoughts most tender than all the beauty that here I see. For those city lights may be grand and glowing, but oh, my bosom with sadness fills. Oh, I ever long for soft breezes blowing across the dear old Bogra Pembroke Hills. Thank you.
You could hear a pin drop, really. She's outstanding altogether. Well done, Peggy. Now, the next man came from Brosnan, County Kerry originally, and like a wise man that he was, he moved out of it to Crusheen, County Clare. Now, I know that he's the holder of the largest, I think, privately held archive of, I suppose, folklore material in the country, and I know that he's still collecting in a lot of areas. He has a huge amount of CDs and books to his name, and I remember him on telly, like he frightened the life out of me. I can remember that, because we'd only a small television, and he came on it one night, and sure, all you could see was the face and the whiskers, and the rabbit's ears, I thought, nearly had whiskers. He needs very little introduction, one of Ireland's greatest storytellers, Mr. Eddie Linehan. Thank you.
I was listening with interest there tonight at the various people who spoke and sang before me. And 3 nights ago, myself and my son were listening to an old man of 95. Now, I'm delighted to be able to say that at least one of my children, one of the 6 of them, has continued the interest that I've had. And it's nice to be able to talk to your children, especially when they know more than you. And it's very easy to say to your children, you think you know, except you don't normally say that. But in this case, he actually does. He's doing his PhD, would you believe, on the fairies. Now, people nowadays, they say the fashion is to, well, the fairies, come on, don't believe that kind of nonsense. I'm not so sure. I've always kept an open mind in these things. And the man that we were sitting listening to these 3 nights ago, as I say, 95, tough man, all his senses. Indeed, he offered us a drop of the stuff and drank some himself. But he's a hard man to catch at home, because at least 3 nights a week he's out dancing until about 2 in the morning at 95. Corofin, they won the Clare, the senior hurling title. No, sorry, it was football in Corofin. It was. We're a slight difference of 8 miles away, but it is hurling in Crusheen. It was football in Corofin. And these would be the under-21s. They won the county title this year. And of course, what did they do? They were all off the beer for the time that they were training. But as soon as they won, yippee, they went out on a tear. And Mikey was with them at 95. And I'm held his own, I'm told. Now, that same man, he had some mighty, mighty interesting stories to tell about the fairies. But the one thing is, he wouldn't give me permission to print these. And I'd like to have in such a book there as Meeting the Other Crowd. Because some of the stories in that, well, I say to people, if you want to sleep tonight, start at the beginning. If you don't want to sleep tonight, start at the end. Because I tell you the last story in that book. Not my stories, from the old people. It would put the hair on your head standing if you have any. And a true story, as is this one that Mikey told us 3 nights ago. Now, he's told me more of the same kind, but as I say, wouldn't give me permission to print them because they're too close, they're family. And this man is very precise. You wouldn't think he was 70 to look at him. But a religious man, and God, a man that can discuss theology with you if you want to. And I'd say the man never went through formal education much, but a very intelligent man. Now, he said that his mother's uncle, and this story happened in 1939, he's a very precise man. It happened to his mother's uncle, who was a young man of about 20, 21 at the time, mighty strong lad, great athlete, great hurler especially, and he'd do anything for a game of hurling. He'd go any place. Now, that was great. As Michael would say, and as the old people knew, the one thing that the good people are interested in, the fairies, is their games. I suppose the Kerry Fairies would be playing football, the Cock ones would be, depending on which side of the county they were from. But in Clare, of course, would be mainly hurling. Now, this young fella was a mighty hurler. To take 2 men normally to mark him in a match. But, as Mikey said, and made no bones about it, the boys started to come for him. They'd always come asking him to play with them when they had a game. And, as the old people knew, the fairies always need a human being to do their business properly. Whether it is dancing, playing music, playing a game, whatever it is, they need at least one live human being present. Now, if you go with them, if you're the person that's chosen, you'll probably be rewarded. If you don't, there's certain consequences, and you should be prepared for that. Now, when they came, they'd always come around dusk. From dusk to dawn is that time. Your man, of course, he was only too delighted. He'd go any place for a game of hurling. And he went, and when he came back, this happened several times, he never told any of the people at home where he had been. Now, of course, naturally enough, they were practical people, and they said, oh, he's gone with some woman. Because he was a strong, handsome lad. As I said, good athlete, good dancer, all the rest of that. He wasn't a musician, but everything else that a young fellow that age would be doing, he was doing it. And they said, he's gone with some woman, but if he was, he didn't tell him about it. And you know yourself, if your brothers and sisters, and he had younger brothers and sisters, he was the eldest in the family, they'll get your secret out of you sooner or later, especially about things like that. But no mention. And I thought then, of course, well, maybe he's gone to a dance. But in those days, everybody in the place knew where there was whatever dance, because what had they to travel on? Foot, or if you were lucky, you had a bike, and 12 or 15 miles around would be the radius that people would be travelling. There was no dance on any of the nights that he was missing. And still they were scratching their heads. What the hell was this? But they began to notice something. Now, I told you, he was always a good hurler. But he began to show when he was playing, to be like a cock team. Certain knacks and tricks that, well, an ordinary hurler wouldn't have. And people said, where in the hell did he learn that? Soon, to take 3 men to mark him. I said he was always a good hurler, but Lord God, he was improving out of all recognition entirely. And people began to, have their own suspicions, but when he wasn't talking, what could they say? Anyway, time passed, and the boys would come for him every so often, and he always went and always came back safely. But this was going on for 3, 4, 5 years maybe, and he was, we'll say, at the age of 23, thereabouts, and he began to think of getting married. Now, of course, I don't know about today, but in those days, well, when people thought about getting married, a certain seriousness would come into the factor. Nowadays, well, you don't know because, well, anyway, he did begin to think, that, what will happen if anything happens to me when I'm away with the boys? Because it was only now, as he thought of getting married, that a thought came back to him, something that he had heard years before, while the crowd were in and could, the old fellows telling stories, talking the gossip of the day. One old man, when the fairies had come up one night in the conversation, had made the comment that, anyone who gets injured when they're away with the fairies, no human doctor can cure them. No, he had heard that night, but it had gone over his head. Young man, he wasn't taking any notes of the old fellas, nonsense, rubbish. But it came back to him now. And he began to think, getting married, if I get injured, what will happen? So, anyway, short while after that, as Mikey said, they came back again. And they asked him to go wherever they were playing that night, and he did it. And immediately they took insult, turned, gone. And of course he knew it, but too late, they were gone. And he knew there would be consequences. Anyway, time passed on, and maybe 10 days, 2 weeks later, he was out this particular evening. Now I said he was the eldest son. They were a farming family in the parish of Kilmaley, that's in the centre of Clare, and he was cutting furze with a slash hook. And he was strong lad, as I said, cutting and cutting and cutting away until it came to knocking off time in the evening, supper time. Now, if he was a hired man, he would have knocked off at that time, because look, there was always tomorrow for a hired man, and tomorrow is another day's wages. But when you're working for yourself, you'll always do the little bit extra. And he decided that there, on the other side of this big drain, there was 4 furze bushes. He'd cut them, and he'd go home for his supper. So that's exactly what he proceeded to do with the slash hook now. Of course, the sensible thing to do, because the drain was 3 or 4 feet wide and about 6 feet deep, water, mud, muck, the sensible thing to do would, of course, have been to jump the drain and cut them right there. But, of course, a lad of 22 or 3, is he thinking of danger? Thinks he can do anything. And there he was, at the edge of the drain, leaning across with the slash hook, and he chopping and chopping and chopping away. But never thinking that the obvious should happen and could happen, and of course it did. The edge of the drain gave way, and down he went. No, it all happened in 5 seconds. But as he fell, of course, he didn't want to be going home with squelch, muck up to his knees and maybe up to his waist, because he didn't know how deep the drain was, but it was deep enough. And as he fell, he grabbed out for something to hold himself. And what did he grab onto except the stump of a furze bush that he had cut on this side of the drain shortly before that? Now, you know yourself, if you're cutting furze, they're tough with a slash hook. They'll be all sharp old edges left. And as he fell, grabbed onto this, of course, it went up through the palm of his hand and out through him. And of course, there he was, a heavy lad, big lad, 6 foot more, and hanging like this, like a man that he'd be half crucified. Now, I don't know how he managed it. Of course, dropped the slash hook and tried to get himself up, to get himself off of this. He did. But Lord God, his hand, he could see daylight out through the palm of his hand. He was, and the blood streaming down. He ran for home, holding his wrist, of course. He'd bleed to death otherwise. And when he arrived into the kitchen, there was his mother making the supper, doing whatever she was doing. And as soon as she saw the bleeding, holy Christ, she said, what happened to them? That is a do what? Now, all the poor woman could do, there were poor people. There was no fancy ointments or medicines in those days. All she could do was get an old sheet, tear it into strips, and wrap it around the hand, try to stop the bleeding anywhere, which she did. After a lot of mess. And while she was still there, trying to soothe the misfortunate boy and to try to keep the blood at bay, the father came in. And when he saw the mess around the floor, holy Christ, he said, what happened to you? Were you fighting? What? Now, I don't know whether the boy explained or not, because you can imagine the kind of pain he was in. But what I do know, because what Mikey told me was, he didn't eat his supper that night. He went to bed. And do you think he slept? Indeed he didn't. He was there moaning and groaning and tossing and turning all night. And of course, the obvious thing to have done would be to get the doctor. But, as I said, there were poor people. The mother, she wanted to get the doctor, but the father, he'll be all right. You know, fathers, a little bit behind sometimes. But anyway, when they got up in the morning, it was worse. Now, the mother did what she could again. But he didn't go out that day. He stayed there by the fire, and he begging him to get the doctor. And no, you'll be all right, the father. But by the time that evening came, it was finally the mother persuaded the husband, look, you can't put him through another night like last night. He's not improving, get the doctor. And finally, the doctor was got. And when the doctor unwound the old whatever the mother had put on it, the old sheet in strips, and saw the mess from the hand, he says, holy God almighty, he says, the hospital immediately. And I tackled up the horse and car and in the 8 miles to Innis into the hospital. And when the doctor there saw it, he said, I'm afraid, he said, that hand will have to come off. Because if it doesn't, you'll lose more than the hand. And of course the boy said, how can I lose my hand? I think of getting married. And the husband, look, I know nothing about that, said the doctor. All I'm telling you is, if that hand don't come off, you're in bigger trouble. And of course it had to be discussed with the parents, but could they contradict the doctor? And finally, the boy, he was put to sleep, and the hand was amputated. Now, that's where the bother started. because in those days, and the mother knew it, you see, there was lots of amputations going on because there was no, as I said, fancy medicines, and there was none of those antibiotics in those times. They were there. But remember, Ireland was only a third world country at the time, and our medicines were coming from England. And 1939, 1940, England had its own problems. The war had started. They needed all the medicine they could get for their own troops, soldiers. Things were going tough. Dunkirk was only a short distance away at that time. But in any case, the mother, she knew all about these amputations. Why wouldn't she? Because things were being amputated then that wouldn't be amputated today because of the new medicines that are available. But what they used to do with the various pieces, fingers, feet, toes, arms, that they amputate was they wouldn't incinerate them. That was regarded as not being Christian. You don't burn human flesh. They do it now, but then again, is there any religion left now? In those days, they usedn't do that. What they used to do was collect them up, and at the weekend, when they'd have enough of them, all these bits that were amputated, they'd bury them near the hospital in a little plot called Shank's Yard. Now, the mother knew that, everybody knew that, and there was no chance, no way that she was letting her fine son's hand be buried with all those other bits and pieces, strangers of all descriptions. No, she wanted the hand to bury it in their own plot above in Kilmaley graveyard. And she kicked up such a fuss that eventually the people, the administration in the hospital said, in the name of Christ, give it her to get rid of her. She was a stubborn woman. Anyway, they gave her the hand inside a little timber box, and they brought it home. Now, the son was left there in the hospital, naturally enough. They brought it home, but by the time they got home, it was too late to do anything with it that day. So what the father did, it was an ordinary country farmhouse, open fire, and the mantelpiece above, you know, where all little bits and pieces were kept away from the children and from the animals, and that was the perfect place to put the box until they could deal with it the following day. So the father took the box up on the chair and stuck it above on the mantelpiece, and they went to bed. But the following morning, early, now they were early risers themselves, but there was this fierce tatarara at the door, and when the father opened the door, there was the man with the uniform. Not the guard, but the telegram boy. Because who had a private phone in those days? Maybe the priest, maybe the doctor, maybe the bank manager. Ordinary people didn't, and when the telegram boy came, usually it was bad news. So the father opened up the telegram, opened up the envelope, and sure enough, it was bad news. All 4 words of it. Urgent, come quick, hospital. So they tackled up the horse and car again and into Ennis, into the hospital, and when they arrived, it was to find that the son was dead. Blood poisoning had set in. They had left it too late, just like the doctor said, and of course, holy God, you can imagine the way they felt. Their grandson, the best athlete in the parish, fine dancer, all the rest of it, and now he was dead. But what was to be done? Life had to go on. And in those days, of course, there wasn't so much undertakers, funeral parlours weren't even heard of. What used to be done simply was the person was brought home, laid out in their own bed, and the wake was held, and the funeral from the house. That was done. And the neighbours, of course, they gathered, and sorry for your trouble, and sorry for your trouble. And they were sorry, because, after all, they were decent people. He was a fine boy, and, well, he was gone. Anyway, when the wake was over, the burial went ahead, and they came back to the house. And you know yourself, very often, that's the worst part of a funeral. That when you do come back, and all the mourners are gone, and you're left there in the silence of your own house to face what has hit you as best you can, everybody faces it sooner or later. And there they were in the kitchen, 2 of them, silence. The children were out someplace. But, like I said, life had to go on, and the father got up to go out. Maybe the cows had to be milked. I don't know what had to be done. But the father, he headed for the door, but as he went, whatever look he gave to the left, there, above, on the mantelpiece, he saw the box. Ah, Lord God Almighty, he says to the wife, you own shook. Hey, look, you forgot to remind me to... And me? But she wouldn't go to take that. That wasn't the kind of woman she was. And why are you blaming me? Why in the name of God didn't you do? And the argument started, and of course, the argument died down just as quick. Look, they didn't want to be attacking each other. After the tragedy they were going through, it was only tension and grief and whatever. But the box was there. And so the father, he opened the chair and he reached for the box, but the very instant that box was in his hand, he knew there was something wrong. And he opened it. Now, not a nice thing to have to do, to open up a box like that with your own son's hand inside in it, but he opened it. And what was in the box? Nothing. The box was empty, and of course he said to his wife, "What in the Christ?" She said, "Did you do it? Me? I've done my wife." And again the argument died down, because it was obvious to each of them as they looked at each other that neither of them knew anything about it. But then the ugly thought came to their minds at the same time, and as they looked at each other, they could know that the same thought was in both of their minds. If this box is empty, what about the other box? The coffin that they were after burying above in the graveyard. Now, as Mikey said, look, if they didn't do something about it, well, that thought would be with them for the rest of their lives. Not a nice thought. Now, if they went into the guard station in Innis and they said, "We need an exhumation order," because you would need an exhumation order to dig up somebody after one day, they'd be asked naturally enough by the guards, well, for what? And if they were to say, "We think the fairies have our son took," they'd be laughed at. Just the guards. Are you gone in the beer or what? No, Mikey said they couldn't do that. And they didn't do that. But what they did do, because they had to have an answer to this, that night, the father and two of the younger sons, they got their spades and a lantern, and up they went to the graveyard. Now, that cardboard down over the lantern to make sure that they weren't spotted, but up they went to the graveyard and they dug up that grave. Now, it was easy dig. After only being filled in the day before, it was easy dig it, and when they came down, 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 and the father was better able to judge these things than the sons, as soon as he knew that they were maybe that much from the coffin, he said to the two boys, "Go aside." He didn't want to be frightening them, just in case. And they pulled back, and the father dug down, down, and when he met the lid of the coffin, took back the dirt of it and unscrewed the 4 screws at the corners, lifted up the cover. And what do you think was in the coffin? Nothing. Coffin empty. And Mikey says, well, of course it was empty. That boy was asked to go with the lads, and he refused. Maybe not refused, but he didn't agree to go. And they were playing somewhere that night. They needed their human being. He was the one that was chosen. He didn't go. Well, he was going, whether he liked it or not, and did go. But of course, as you know, as most Cork people would know, I suppose, a huddler with one hand isn't much good. They came back for the hand as well. and as Mikey, and I tell you, he's dead serious. He would tell you, a man of 95 with all his senses would tell you to this very day, the sad part of it is it needn't have been like that. Because, look, 1939-40, that's 66 years ago. He was 22 at the time, he'd be 88. He might be dead, but then again he mightn't. Because there's Mikey at 95, dancing 3 nights a week until 2 o'clock in the morning, well able to take his beer and all the rest. He mightn't be dead, but the real tragedy, as Mikey said, he would have been married a short time after that. The name would be still there. Now, the name is gone, but he's still playing with the boys, and will be. There's no comeback. So a lot of these stories, not as funny or as peculiar as they might seem. That man absolutely believes that happened. And my son, when we were coming away that night, he said to me, and my son is 24, he said to me, "Isn't it an amazing thing that in the year 2006 you can still hear a story like that from a man like that who absolutely believes it?" I think so too.